Okay, we're at 12 o'clock midday, and I want to say good afternoon to those who have joined us so far in the Zoom. This is applying to grad school, and this is brought to you by the Student Center, and we are collaborating with our affiliate partner, UniDirect, out in the UK, to bring this session to you where we're going to talk about what it takes to apply to grad school and to help you to decide how ready you are to go through this process, and based on what is available, what suits you the most. And so you can come to some personal decisions on your own. So this is part of a two-part information series. So today at 12 is going to be myself and Dr. Ade, who will be talking to you about generally the graduate application process, what is usually required depending on where you might be applying to, and helping you to come to some decisions as to how ready am I to successfully navigate this process. And this is a really big step because if you are joining us today, we know that you've already accomplished undergraduate type level studies. So, and you're now probably looking at the next steps, whether you've just graduated or you've been working for a couple of years, and just trying to see whether it's time for upgrade of knowledge and skills and how to go about it. You have an interest in going to that next step. Dr. Ade and I, Liz and I have been there before. We've gone through that process ourselves, as well as working with students on a daily basis that are thinking about going through that process and what it takes to successfully submit a strong application for graduate school. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping rules or matters. You're going to remain muted for this session. You can send your questions throughout the presentations using your Q&A option or the chat option. And we can address those questions right after at the Q&A segment. I'm going to start off first, and I'm going to go through the overall process of graduate applications and what that process looks like. And we're going to go through a bit of an assessment to help you to ask yourself the pointed questions as to how ready you are to apply to graduate school, and if you have all of what is required for you to do so. And then Liz is going to take over, and she's going to talk about the statement of interest or personal statement, and then touch a bit on the research proposal, depending on what type of graduate program that you are seeking to apply to. So, and after that, we will get to the Q&A. So we hope that you have a lot of great questions to us. It would be great to find out where most of you are coming from. I know we're targeting Caribbean students, so feel free to let us know which country that you're joining us from. It's good to have you, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. Just so you know, we're running a poll as part of this session, and I'm going to launch the poll shortly. And you can take your time throughout the presentation to do the poll, and I encourage all of you to take part. So I've just launched it. And so if you can spare us a few moments during the session to take part in the poll, and we'll reveal the results at the end of the session as well. So without further ado, just in case you didn't hear my name the first time, I am Sheena Allen, Lead Advisor at the Student Center, and I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. Elizabeth Ade, who will be co-facilitating this session with you this afternoon. So let's get started. Sorry, just trying to get my right screen ready. So we're going to do why grad school, and then we're going to look over getting started, what the process looks like. Liz is going to talk to you about the statement of interest research proposal, and then we'll get to the Q&A. So let's look at what graduate school is. And I took this definition from University of Purdue in the US, and it kind of describes fundamentally what graduate school is about. As you know already, this is not a decision that is to be taken lightly. This is a very tough process of decision making. And graduate school is where it's really like a job. It becomes a job. It's a labor of love, and it's a very focused occupation. And so it's important to have a clear idea of what you may want to study. So while at the undergraduate level, you might look at broad areas in your specific field of study, grad school, you kind of home in on a specific area. You work closely, especially if you're going to do a research type graduate program, you work closely with a professor who acts as your supervisor, and you also liaise with other faculty members. And in some cases, you may become part of a lab group or research team and work closely with other students on that team. And so grad school encompasses a lot of different layers and tiers. So this to me was one of the perfect descriptions of what grad school entails. Here are some frequently asked questions, and I want to go through each of these questions with you that I get a lot. So one of the first questions will be, are there more funding opportunities at the graduate level? And is a yes and a no kind of situation. So this all boils down to the type of graduate program that you're looking to do. If you're looking to do something more research-based, there are often opportunities to receive funding. It depends also on where you are looking to pursue your study and the requirements as well, and what you're bringing to the table. So, and if what you're looking to research is in meeting with the faculty's research objectives and interests as well. So sometimes some persons can get quite a bit of funding, and funding can come in all different types. It can come in the form of a research assistantship, a teaching assistantship, or sometimes it could be a tuition type funding process. And in some cases, some graduate schools only admit persons that they're actually going to fund. And this will vary by school, by program, and depending on where you are looking to pursue these studies. Can I get my entire PhD funded? This is a question we get all the time. And this is not a yes answer. This really varies dependent on where you are looking to pursue your PhD and your topic, field, and so what is set up, what is the setup, what is the school setup or the faculty setup. So there's some cases where some PhDs are funded, and sometimes there are cases where persons may have start off paying and then they might have received some type of funding opportunity. And then there's some PhDs where you completely have to self-finance. So there's certain dynamics that really depends on how, whether you get a yes, no, or maybe so. Is it easier to stay in the destination country after completion of studies? And I know there are persons who are pursuing this level of studies with the hopes that maybe they can go on to further studies even more. If they're coming from a master's degree, they might want to go and do a PhD, or they might want to go and work afterwards. Again, this opportunity varies by countries. So for example, countries such as Canada, there are opportunities for persons to gain an opportunity to work afterwards. In the US, it depends. So you do get an option to sometimes stay on and gain some practical experience. For those who study in the area of STEM, which would be like science, technology, engineering, or math, sometimes there are even more opportunities for you to do so. What are my job prospects after graduate school? Sorry for that error there on the screen. It depends on the field that you're studying, and some persons would have seen an uptake in getting a job within the first 6 to 12 months after graduation. So I would say in some cases it's very positive. Then another question we get is, my undergraduate grade point average is not great. Can I still consider graduate school? And I would say yes, because there are different pathways for you to get a graduate degree. And there's sometimes provisions made for persons who may not meet the grade point average requirements for you to actually gain acceptance into your program of choice at some point. Do I have to pursue a degree, or are there alternate programs at the graduate level? And there are different types of graduate qualifications. So one of the most sought after credentials is probably the master's degree, but there are other qualifications that you can obtain. So there are postgraduate certificates, there are postgraduate diplomas as well. And it all depends on where you're looking to study and what your interests may lie, where your interests may lie. So how do you examine your readiness? So how ready are you for graduate school? So these are three main categories of thoughts that I often get students to think about. What are your objectives? Like, why are you looking to pursue or to further your studies, right? What's the main reason? What's the rationale? What are your experiences? So what experiences have you had that have prepared you enough to think that you can take this. So be it academic experiences, volunteer-wise, or work experiences. What experiences have you had that you think have readied you for this? And then expected outcomes. What are your plans for yourself after undertaking such a study? And this is really an investment of your time and your money and a whole bunch of other things. What are your expected outcomes? If you can provide answers under each of these categories, then you are a lot closer to determining how ready you are. So from going through this, you might say to yourself, well, I can't quite answer all these questions, so I think I have to do some more research. Or you may be able to answer all these questions and say, well, I'm ready to go to the next step, which is to get started defining where, what, how, when, and why. All right. So think about these things as you are kind of looking at yourselves. Maybe you're looking for someone else or you're looking at yourself, but try to figure out. So why, what prepared you? What are your plans going forward for the future? So getting started. And the one way to get started is by doing research. Research is where it's at. You need to start doing research. You have to figure out, what do you want to study? What type of grad program? Do you want to do a research type program, or do you want to do a talk-based type program? Big question in the room is, how am I going to fund this? Are you going to self-finance yourself? Are you going to be looking for funding? Are you going to be doing a bit of both? Those are some of the questions that you need to ask. Are you looking for a program that offers internships or projects? What would you like your program to look like? What are the offerings that you think should come with the program? What are you seeking? And another question is, where do I want to study? And if you're not thinking about going to some place physically, then you're going to ask, what mode of delivery? Am I looking for in person? Am I looking for a blended program? Or are you looking for online or distance program? So those are some of the questions to help you with your searches. So then when you search, you know that you might be looking for a program in the sciences, particularly maybe something biological. You might be looking for something that is research-based. So you might have a topic in mind that you want to investigate. You might want to place your research in a particular type of institution. You might not be too hardcore on internships or projects, but you might be looking for a program that gives you the ability to be a research assistant, or maybe be even a teaching assistant. And then you might be thinking of going somewhere, or maybe doing a blended type program if there are any available. So let's do a quick overview of the application process. And you will see that faculty search and school selection are in red. These are, to me, two of the most vital steps that you need to take. And because, especially for those who might be looking at something a bit research-based, sometimes your research has to meet what the faculty or department that you're applying to fits into. So you have to look to see what kind of research are they doing, what research their faculty members are doing, if what you're looking to research fits in or is in line with their areas of research or their research objectives or interests. And then obviously school selection, because you can't apply to 100 schools at this level. You really have to have a nice, neat number of schools, because this process can be quite tedious. So you don't want to be doing too much or too many schools. Then there's obviously an application form process and the fee that comes with it usually. Sometimes depending on where you're looking to study, some don't have a fee. So I find that in a lot of the UK type schools, they might not have a fee for graduate or postgraduate programs. Then you always need a curriculum vitae, because they need to see how you look on paper. So they need to look at your education, your work experience, your professional experience, volunteer if even. Depending on where you're studying, there are also standardized test scores. So if you are US centered, then you know that GREs, which is the graduate record examination, or GMATs, which is the test for business schools or management type programs, may be required. And also note that there are some schools outside of the US that will take these scores into consideration. So sometimes they're required, sometimes they're not, depending. And then we have to look at references, because persons want to see if they're persons that can attest to your abilities, to the work that you've done. And sometimes they may ask for 1, sometimes they may ask for 2, or some may ask for 3, depending on the program that you're seeking to do. And of course, sometimes there's usually a personal statement or a statement of purpose. Sometimes there's a statement of research interests. So it can be titled different things. And this is separate and apart from the research proposal. And this is where Liz is going to get into it and to explain to you about that process. So in a nutshell, in a brief overview, especially if you're looking for anything at the master's degree level or even PhD level, this is a overview, a summarized view of what the application process may look like. And obviously it might vary. There's some schools that don't require like supervisor approval prior to your application. So that means that you don't have to do a heavy faculty search, but you should anyway. And then there's some schools that do require you to have approval from a faculty, or at least that you discuss and introduce yourself to faculty even via email or so forth, and that they would have endorsed you applying or so. So there are different layers to this process, and it all boils down to the type of program, the type of school, and where you might be looking to study. So I'm going to hand over to Liz, and Liz is going to get us to the research, talking about the research proposal. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a bit.
Thank you, Sheena. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen now. Bear with me. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
Does that come up? Brilliant. Okay. So just tell me if the slides aren't moving. So my name's Liz, and I'm based in the UK. My own educational background, I've been through bachelor's, master's, so a taught master's, and also a PhD in the UK. And I can, reflect a bit on my own experiences as I'm presenting to you about the kind of logistics of what to write in your personal statement and your research proposal. Has that moved on okay? Just
yes,
checking.
It has. Yeah.
Great, thanks. So I know, Sheena has kind of run through this in the presentation so far, but what I will always say to students is go back and check the application requirements, see what it's asking for. You've got to be knowledgeable about what they want in an application. And it does vary a bit from university to university and country to country. So for any postgrad application, go back and check what they're actually asking for. Pretty much all postgrad applications, well, and undergraduate as well, will ask for a personal statement or letter of motivation. And in essence, this is your opportunity to sell yourself and to tell the admissions team about you, what you've done academically, and also, overlapping with your skills and your development of skills, which might reflect on work experience, voluntary experience you've done, and also your hobbies. So it's a really important opportunity to tell the reader of your application about you. It goes beyond just your academic experiences, which are obviously still incredibly important. It is all about reflecting your motivation as to why you want to do the postgraduate course you're applying for. And that's a really important point that Sheena touched on earlier in her presentation. So, make sure you're really emphasizing about that motivation, your motivation for wanting to pursue your postgrad studies. So, most postgrad applications are looking for around about a page. Sometimes it can be 1,000 words for your personal statement. Go back and read the guidance, because that is effectively rule number 1. you've got to make sure you are putting it specific to the requirements there. Things to include in your statement are, as we've touched on, your motivation for studying that course, your motivation for studying at that university. That's a really important one, because you're tailoring your personal statement or motivation letter specific to that university and course. So, tell the admissions team what you have done academically. It's also worth reflecting on why you're applying to study in that particular country, whether it be the UK, Canada, the US, or another country. I really like it when students give lots of kind of concrete examples of how you've gained skills and experience. So it might be you're talking about your kind of voluntary work experience. It might be you're talking about being captain of the football team in your undergraduate studies, but you can use examples like this to demonstrate a variety of skills and experience that show your suitability for a postgraduate study. Just make sure you don't just write a very kind of like light example. You need to give really detailed examples of demonstrating your skills and experience. That is what the admissions team are going to be looking for. Really important to build on in your letter of motivation. I thought I would add a couple of slides on UK applications. That's one of my areas of expertise. And for postgraduate applications, they often tend to roll throughout the year. So within reason, as long as you've got time to get your visa, you can often make an application. There are some exceptions though, so it's always worth checking and making sure there aren't any application deadlines for your postgraduate application. So I also thought I would touch on a point that Sheena made earlier about UK applications. If you have a low degree classification, or sometimes even if you haven't got the kind of honours year, you can do what is called in the UK a pre-masters course, which is a way of kind of improving your academic background and allowing you to enter a master's degree. It's worth inquiring about this if you're looking at your GPA from your degree and you're frustrated with yourself because you haven't done as well as you feel you could have done. A pre-master's course can be a way of kind of improving your academic skills and experience. So now moving more onto the kind of research side of postgraduate applications. So looking at, if we're thinking about it, there can be a variety of different research-based postgraduate applications that you might be considering. Quite often people might have done a taught postgraduate course and then they want to do more detailed research. So they might then, after a taught postgraduate course, be looking at options for an MPhil or a Master of Philosophy or a Doctor of Philosophy. So basically a PhD or a more kind of detailed research programme. And they do differ quite a lot from taught postgraduate programmes. So, there's usually in the UK 2 ways of applying for a PhD. The first and most common way really is to look for advertised opportunities, which can often have funding attached to them. Not always, but And you have to check whether international students are eligible to apply for those opportunities, and to check the conditions of the funding attached. But that is quite a common route for a PhD application in the UK and in a range of other countries. The second route of applying for a PhD is to develop your own research proposal, and basically to find a department that shares your research interests and ask them if they're interested in supervising you for your PhD, or it might be an MPhil. So that is an alternative option. I think the challenge there is you have to write your proposal. So you have to know your research, you have to know your academic articles, you have to really demonstrate that in the scope of your research proposal. And I think quite often that might be more a route you're taking if you're self-funding, or you might be fortunate enough to be able to secure funding. So in the context of looking at developing any research, you know, when I think back to my own PhD, I applied for an advertised PhD opportunity, and going into that PhD interview, you know, it's quite challenging because yes, it's an advertised opportunity, but you have to make sure you've done an awful lot of reading around that subject area, and that you're really knowledgeable of the literature, so the journals, the articles, what research has happened in that area you're applying for. That's really important if you're working on your own research proposal. So it may well be you've done your dissertation in a particular topic and you want to build on that work, build on your findings. It's often people applying for PhDs have a master's degree or a substantial amount of work experience in that field. And it's interesting to kind of look at, you know, a PhD in America can include it can include taught elements as well as the kind of research thesis aspect. But in the UK, a PhD is usually just research based. It has very little kind of taught elements. I mean, my own PhD in the UK, really, it wasn't taught at all. You know, you would go on sort of ad hoc courses like, you know, scientific writing skills, but they're quite different. So, you know, check back to what they're asking for when you're developing your research proposal. Emphasized again, you know, read and make sure you are giving the department, the admissions team, what they're asking for. You need to make sure as well that your CV is suitably strong and that it really kind of reflects your academic background and any work experience you have. Make sure all your supporting documents are lined up properly. So what I would say to anyone thinking about applying for a PhD is a lot of applicants will have a master's degree, they'll have a taught postgrad, or they might have 10 years work experience in a particular field. It really helps if you've had articles published from your undergraduate or taught postgraduate degree. That is really something that would help you a lot in terms of getting accepted on a PhD. You've obviously got to be really confident in an interview situation. So practice makes perfect. Make sure you're up to speed in terms of what the department do, what the research interests are of the team that are likely to interview you. Make sure you're really knowledgeable and demonstrate that knowledge in the scope of not only your research proposal, but also the interview. Well, that's the end of my section, but please feel free to ask any questions at the end.
Thank you, Liz. And I think it's
welcome.
important. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was very insightful, and I hope that persons can gather. It was great content for you to at least start thinking about really what you want to do this level of study and what exactly you have in mind and how it varies across different countries. And I know Liz was referred a bit to the UK because that's one of her area of expertise. On my side, I did my grad studies in North America and I did them in Canada. And that process, a graduate degree in Canada, there are different types. So it does contain a taught process. So it's 2 years in length, but I will say it's 3 years because 2 years are typically focusing on taught courses and then thesis design courses to get you ready for your thesis proposal, which you have to then present so that you can get approved to then get to the next stage. So it's really 3 years in totality, which funny enough, in some cases is the length of a PhD program. Sometimes if you do full-time PhD studies and you have to defend your work. And luckily for me, the program that I was admitted to, admission was based on their ability to fund you. And my funding package looked, because I was working in the field, so I was doing a degree that was in the area of my professional expertise. And the personal statement took me about 3 months to perfect. And this is after quite a few people read it and did their own add this, don't take, I had a lot of input, but I had 2 options I worked with. So it was one or the other. And I went with the one that spoke with money. But that is not always the outcome for everybody. But I chose those programs because it was explicit that acceptance is only based on their ability to fund your research. And on top of getting, the funding did not cover everything. So just in case you're wondering, it didn't cover everything, but it covered a good portion of tuition, but they also got a teaching assistantship. So I taught undergraduate level courses and supervised certain undergraduate level classes for some of the profs that I worked with, especially my supervisor. So because of my area, we'll cover certain courses that were related to what I was actually researching. And so that was my journey and what my program looks like. But there are so many different stories as well in terms of how that process will look like for persons. The hardest part of that program for me was getting that thesis written and then defending that thesis, because defending doesn't always mean it's going to be accepted. Sometimes you go back to the drawing board and then come back again, and the defense is public. That's one of the big things about in North America, at least, your thesis for your grad, your master's level thesis, you actually defend publicly. And I had quite a number of persons out of nowhere, questions were popping at me. So when I thought I was going to have just a regular hour-long thesis defense, it went for a while. It was a little bit intimidating. So that is my story in terms of going through the graduate school process. So again, if you are looking at something that's research-based, you're looking at anything that might be giving you some level of funding, you really have to take your time to understand the process that is required. I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm going to invite all of you in the Zoom room to send us any questions you have that you want us to answer. We're here to answer any queries. We're going to get to your questions shortly. So in terms of, I just want to focus on timelines. At least give yourself a year to prep for this. And this is based on just working with students doing this, as well as my own personal experience. So 3 to 4 months to find suitable programs and options. And this is dedicated time that you would allocate to searching, researching. About 3 months to prepare your applications, because every applications have different requirements, as Liz would have clearly pointed out to you. And then 3 to 4 months to really start, to prepare for the start process. Once you've gotten that offer and it's a good offer and you're deciding to go ahead, then there's some other steps like your finances, immigration, for those of you who might be going abroad, you know, just getting a schedule up and mental preparation, because now the reality of, oh my gosh, what have I signed up for? This is work that I actually have to do. You really got to get yourself prepared in that space to get ready. So these are some recommended timelines, and obviously depending on where you are at in terms of readiness, it might be less, it could be more. So give yourself, one essential thing is time, and create a plan. You need to definitely create a plan for yourself on how you're going to go about this. I'm going to open up the floor now to questions. We have a question in already, and feel free to put them either in the chat or use the Q&A option. Is an icon called Q&A located on your Zoom panel, so you can enter your questions through there. To those who just recently joined us, please note we're running a poll. And so the poll is running all now, and there are 4 questions that we're asking just to get an idea of where your minds are at in terms of grad school. So we invite you to participate in the poll. We're going to close it right before we end the session. All right, so we have some questions, Liz. Okay, what are the best ways to find scholarships? I won't be able to continue grad studies without help with funding. You want to take that one, Liz?
Okay, so it's tricky. I think it's very challenging to find funding, certainly in the UK. You can often find small fee discounts off a taught postgraduate program, or it's more common to get funding attached to PhD programs in the UK, but you do need to check whether you're eligible as an international student. It's whenever people ask me about scholarships in the UK, it is challenging, but there's more available for kind of research focused than taught. So it's worth looking, and it's worth applying early as well, because often a lot of universities will offer a small sort of early bird fee discount for applicants who get their application in before a certain date. That's quite common. So, plan ahead and look at the conditions attached for PhDs that are advertised.
Thank you. And if you're looking at North America, then usually to improve your chances of obtaining funding, if you're looking at the US, I recommend taking a standardized test for grad school. So if you're looking at business or management type programs, you can take the GMATs. Or if you're looking at any other type of program, usually the GREs are what they would look at. And similar to how SATs are treated, that can help secure sometimes access to funding, because the US is very standardized testing based as part of their admissions process. And then additionally, it depends on the area of study. So I find in North America per se, if you're in Canada, you're looking at social sciences, I find they might put more funding sometimes for those. If you are looking at MBAs or any type of like medicine type programs, I find they're less, or engineering, I find there might be less funding options. In the US though, they might put more funding to STEM, because obviously STEM is a big industry for the US and employers might pump money in there and there might be opportunities. So again, it comes down to where you are looking at and what's trending at the time, because every year there's a new priority, there's a different focus. So how does your studies or research interest fit into the bigger picture? So those, I hope that helps. And don't sign up for a grad program sometimes just because of money, because at the end of the day, you still have to be interested in what you're really looking to research. Because to me, grad studies was a labor of love. I loved what I was researching, and that helped me through those nights where you want to just rip those, throw that laptop aside and just go to sleep. But you really have to be motivated by what your research is about. So passion is in there as well as driving you. Yes, there will be a recording of this webinar available at a later date. And we're going to invite you to sign up to the Student Center's YouTube channel. And our YouTube channel is under the Student Center Media. And so all of our recordings will actually go there, and it will also be on our Facebook page. So as soon as it's been edited and tidied up, we will put the videos up. And for those of you who are here and you would have registered, we will send you a link also to access that video. And that link will expire within a 2-week period. So make sure that you watch it within that period, or go to our social media to recap the webinar itself. Do you offer any guidance to tutors for the GRE at general exam? Can you explain me, are you a tutor who offers GRE assistance? I'm not understanding your question. Are you asking if there are persons that tutor for the GRE exam? If you want to provide a follow-up response to my question. But I'll take a stab. If you are in the Caribbean, there are not many people who provide tutoring for the GRE exam. A lot of that is via online resources. So there are lots of online tools that can help you to prepare for the exam. Similar to the SAT, it is verbal, there's an analytical component. So it might be a math-based type component than an English-based, just for simpler terms, and a writing component. So it's really an exam of practice, and not necessarily of, by that time you would have had some level of math, you've gone through college level math and communication and writing. So it's really one of practice. So I would more recommend looking at online tutorials, practicing to take the test more so. There are some online prep companies that offer GRE tutoring, but they can be costly. But one of the companies that we normally send students to is Khan Academy, and that's a free resource. Sometimes they do have GRE related questions, and I'll put it in the chat what it is, so you can go on there to see if they still have information for persons taking GRE exams. But that is one of the free resources that we used to send students to. Hope that is helpful. All right, I'm just putting it in the chat here. Liz, do you have any information on GREs?
No, nothing really to add, other than I think it's like any admissions test prep where practice makes perfect. Yeah. And get a book, go online, keep going away at it, and things do click. I think the more you kind of practice, all of a sudden you get there on it, and it will help your score.
Yeah. I've just entered information on Khan Academy. They used to have a section for GRE, and they will have like actual questions, practice questions, and but they've changed up a lot over the last year because of COVID and so forth. So, but I know that was a free resource. But there are there are other providers primarily based out of the US, and I find that because they're the source of the exam, I find a lot of their practice packages were sometimes the best to go from, and it's really one of practice. And if you can get a book as a guide as well, and then take as many practice exams as possible, and then it depending on the schools, as Liz said in her presentation, go back to what the required score is, so that you have an idea and set of at least a minimum standard score that you should meet, and it should be above what your preferred schools are looking for. that gives you more options. As I said, for US schools, and if you're looking at the US, for example, to do graduate studies, they definitely weigh that exam in mind if they are GRE centered. Obviously, MBAs will be GMAT tests, but again, definitely look at these schools and what they're looking for. We're going to have another minute to take any more questions before we close out. So if you have any more questions, feel free to put them in now. I hope you found this session very helpful. We're going to close the poll right now. So from the poll about when it comes to the country that most of you are looking to pursue graduate studies, Canada and the UK were the top two. And some of you are looking at Australia. That's also a good option for graduate school as well. Some indicated Barbados. So it depends on where you are, that might be in a different island. That might be for you to travel or not. Some said Jamaica. US, a few of you said the US, and some of you said none of the above. And most of you don't know about these standardized exams such as GREs or GMATs. And some are not interested in taking these exams. I don't blame you. They're not exactly favorable exams. No one likes taking the test. And most of you are looking for scholarships. And most of you are looking to pursue graduate studies for career advancement. So thank you very much for taking part in the poll. We have 2 more questions. Currently, are there any full scholarships for international students who may be studying in the US? If you're already studying in the US, I think is best for you to go to the school that you are currently studying at to see what they have available. This question sounds like you're already studying in the US. That's my best recommendation for you. Would you consider Canada a better option to pursue top programs in child psychology and social sciences? The interesting question. I don't think Canada is necessarily a better option. It all boils down to what you want. Liz, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, exactly that really. I mean, I do more applications and support more applications for psychology probably than I do any other course. And that's postgrad often to the UK. It really depends as well, psychology, where you want to practice and what your long-term goal is career-wise. Because in the UK, the courses are accredited by the British Psychological Society, BPS. So, and you can do a conversion psychology taught master's program that you can enter having done any undergraduate degree program. You can then go and do a conversion psychology program, which gives you the professional accreditations to pursue a career longer term as a clinical psychologist, alongside a whole range of other kind of professional experience and a clinical doctorate that you need. So yeah, it depends where you want to practice and where you want to work longer term.
What I will say is that if you're looking at Canada, a lot of the psychology type masters, they still have a research component. Some might be taught based, but a lot of them still have a research component. And one of the, if depending on what your undergrad degree or where your undergrad degree is from, for example, like if you're coming from UWA, University of West Indies, and you're coming with a psychology degree, I find those might be better to matriculate into a UK school sometimes, as opposed to a Canadian school, because sometimes I find there's an absence of a strong clinical component. So it's tricky. So it really depends on what you want out of it. So it's not to say that Canada is a better option. This depends on what you want for yourself, your academics. So someone has to do an assessment of your qualifications, see your strengths, what you have on paper before they can make that determination for you. I hope that was helpful. Another question is, I want to pursue studies in MBA concentration in agribusiness or international business. Is Australia or Canada better options to the UK?
I think it depends again where you want to go. I don't think. I mean, it's an interesting sort of field to go into. I mean, we get a lot of applications in international business to the UK. I mean, you've got two quite different subject areas there. Agribusiness being quite specialist, international business being quite a broad topic. So I would sort of look at that initially to decide what you actually want to do and research the different sort of career options. Specifically if you're looking at sort of agribusiness as a kind of master's option. But really, it depends where you want to go.
And if you want to take standardized tests, because if you're looking at anything in North America and it's MBA based, you will have to be looking at one of those standardized tests I spoke about. So that is usually a requirement. And even for some UK programs, I found sometimes too.
Yeah, normally for MBAs in the UK, they will ask for a minimum 3 years professional experience. So I would always, with an applicant, say, well, how long have you been working for, post your degree, and what have you done? Can you send me a copy of your CV so I can assess your suitability to apply for an MBA?
Yeah, I think you need to get an assessment then. You need to get your credentials looked at and see a full evaluation of yourself as a student before. I think all 3 countries you mentioned are good possible options, but it depends on what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do.
Okay, so then there's one on pharmacology.
Yes.
So, okay, picking up on that, you could start looking now to decide where you want to go to. I mean, the UK will almost certainly be the best option to look for it for an MSc in pharmacology or biotechnology. If you want a program taught in English, look in UK universities. Scholarships, the same, go and look and see what they're offering, see if you can get an early bird fee discount, and just have a browse about and see what's out there. Or you're very welcome to come to us and we'll provide advice and recommendations.
And get a full assessment of you, see what might be the best route, and then you decide and take it from there. Is the cost of living high as an international student in the UK?
I think it's I don't think it's really vastly any different to US, Canada, or Australia. I mean, I think Australia can be, quite expensive, really living wise. It also depends where you're going within the UK. So obviously, if you go to London, you are going to have higher accommodation costs. You can go to sort of nice, more campus-based universities outside London and find quite reasonable accommodation costs. So, I think what Sheena and I would always want is to know a kind of budget that you have for your postgrad studies, and we can sort of advise accordingly from your budget as well as your interests, where you want to go, your subjects.
Yeah. And based on the type of questions that you've answered to us, I would recommend coming back to part 2 at 4, because we have some actual schools. So we have Illinois State, we have Oregon State University. Those are 2 US schools. We have University of Stirling from out in the UK. And then we have Sheridan and Seneca coming from Canada, giving you some alternate postgraduate level study options as well. So you get a chance to hear from the schools as well. Always also encourage you to take part in any of our upcoming events at the Student Center. Every month we have some type of event, whether it's advisors facilitating events like this one or actual schools. And then we also have our Cut Fest education fairs. We have Cut Fest coming up later on this year in the fall period between October and November. And it's going to be online, so you can access it from anywhere, anytime. And in the meantime, you can also go on our website to look at the school directory to see schools that might be possible options to start with and do some research. So there are options for you and resources for you Caribbean students catering to you guys on helping you to search for your right fit. So thank you for your questions. We definitely do appreciate it. Thank you, Liz, for helping me with the question and answer session. So Jess,
you're welcome.
Recapping, sorry, my thing is stuck. Right. So final advice before we end off. So be passionate. Passion is needed for this process. An open mind is key. So you're open to all the possibilities. We definitely encourage you to seek professional guidance. There are professionals like Liz and myself here to assist you in mapping this process for you. Create a plan and timelines for yourself. This is really a process of planning and getting organized, not just academically, but also financially, because a big part of education is a financial component. So trying to see what options you're working with. And I will say be as honest with yourself. Don't lie to yourself, because that really defeats the whole process. And then make career sense of higher education. This has to fit into somewhere, a plan for you to increase your earning potential, probably upgrade your career in terms of a promotion, maybe move into a completely different industry and starting fresh. But this is one of the general outcomes. And if you're looking at return on investment, that's an important question and to ask yourself in terms of the why you're doing this. And so again, inviting you to come back this evening. We are here at 4. We have schools that will be giving you an overview of their program offerings, what their admissions process looks like. They will be touching on funding, possible scholarships as well. If the persons that might require a visa to come, so international students. So I'll be back with them at 4 o'clock this evening, as this is part of a 2-part information session series. And we are here, like Liz and I said, for you to contact us. We do offer a free 15-minute consult. This is where we fully explain how we work with you, and you can decide if you want to continue. Liz does sessions on Mondays between 2 to 4, and I do sessions on Wednesdays between 2 to 4. You can book your 15-minute, and you can do so on the Student Center's website, www.thestudentcenter.net. And I want to take this time for joining us to talk about applying to grad school, part 1. We know that we live in a digital and virtual age, so we appreciate any time given to us. So good luck with your search. Remember, the Student Center, we are here to assist you. And we will make this recording available at a later date. And thank you for taking part in the poll, and continue to enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe.
Thank you. Bye.